Hello, beautiful creatures of the internet. I'm Mango Jones. I am running really late today, but such is life. As always, in the description, you will find a link to all the other people that I share a StreamYard with, called the Stream Pervs, our whole thing. Slim, Sir Little Wolf, Vila Vendetta, all those people, yeah, they're down there. There is a link to the list of all sorts of resources, LGBTQIA plus, reproductive health, things of that nature. And then there's also the LinkTree of Things. For some reason, LinkTree doesn't recognize Cash App as a valid URL anymore. So if you feel as though you would like to support the channel, the Cash App is #BabyKillerMango. Yeah. So anyway, hey Reaper, hey Skits. Once again, I apologize for being late, but my small person comes first. Always. Now, I have been doing like a shit ton of work on this. Like a lot of work. This was initially just going to be one stream, but I am going to have to break this up into multiple streams because my notes for just the 90s up until the end of the boat crash and like right before the murders and then the legal shit, that's 29 pages of notes. And then all of September 2021, that's like 22 pages of notes. Again, not even including like the murder stuff. So yeah, this is going to be a multi-parter. Tonight we're going to go up until the end of 2020, like right before the murders happened. We're going to go right in that area. So again, starting from the 90s, going to the 2020s, but not to the murder. We'll start at the murder in part 2. Now, hey, Lizard. Oh my god. Goddamn Capri Suns. Fucking Capri Suns. So, in this, we are going to actually talk a lot about, like, laws, regulations, the reason why they are able to do particular things. So, if you find that really, really boring, like, if you're not a fan of legal law and learning about other states' laws and shit, like, you don't have to stay. I will not be insulted, I promise. Because it's a lot of information. Hey, Sydney. When I do part 2, I will be including the link to the Google Drive that is full of all of the sources for this stream, as well as all of the other parts of this series, except for the history of PMPED and the 14th Judicial Circuit. Those will be added once I actually get to that stream. Okay, so moving along. I made a slideshow because I love slideshows. All right, so when it comes to the Murdaugh murders and the legal filings and events leading up to the indictment and the trial, it's important to understand how it got to the point that it did. I will not go into full detail on the extent of the good old boys club that had been fostered over many generations in this stream. I will do that another day once we are done going through all of this multi-part series. But I will talk about people that were involved, are involved, or who may have been part of it previously. Understanding the established history that is verifiable and well documented through legal documents and articles from the time will help in the grand picture of answering the questions: why did Alex kill Maggie and Paul, and who exactly was he trying to protect when he was on the stand testifying? Because it was very clear that he was not going to give up names. for anything. And when people that were indicted already on charges along with him, like conspiracy, they also, like, he didn't even say anything bad about them. Said they were great people. Obviously not if they are conspiring with you to steal money over multiple years. But I digress. There will be various parts of lawsuits that were filed against Alex, mentioned and shown, and the Google Drive for this series does have those full pieces in them. So don't worry, I will be adding that in sometime after the stream, in like the description and stuff. So moving along. Over the course of the 90s, PMPED had a few key things happen for them. John Parker, who we heard about in the trial, he became president of the firm. Ronnie Cosby joined with them. Randolph Murdaugh IV, he graduated law school and he joined. Alex Murdaugh, when he graduated law school, he initially was working with Moss, Kuhn, and Fleming with his buddy Fleming, but he ended up leaving and joining PMPED. There's also Perry Buckner, the Honorable Judge Perry Buckner, who was the owner of the Buckner law firm that became assistant solicitor of the 14th Circuit under Randolph III. And John Parker is one of the lawyers on a medical malpractice suit that awarded the highest payout for a plaintiff in Hampton County to the tune of $14 million, which is 13 times higher than the average payout at the time. At late 90s, the firm was highly successful. Things were going great. In 2000, Perry Buckner got elected judge of the 14th Judicial Circuit, and John Parker bought his old law firm. Like, he bought the Buckner firm, building and all. Undisclosed amount of money, but again, this dude was just an assistant solicitor under Randolph III. And now Randolph's law firm bought his law firm. It's a whole thing. Like, the ties, they run deep. So in 2000, it's also the year that you see the number of personal injury lawsuits filed in Hampton County increase, and the area start to become what is known as a judicial hellhole. A judicial hellhole is not a good distinction. It's a bit complicated, but in order to earn that distinction, the American Tort Reform Association, which, by the way, for clarity, a tort, because that word comes up a lot, a tort is a civil wrong that causes a claimant to suffer loss or harm, resulting in legal liability for the person who commits the act. Like personal injury and wrongful death lawsuits, those are tort law. Some of those cases can become criminal, but they're primarily handled in civil court, which is why PMPED was a personal injury firm. So, again, but judicial hellholes, like, it all comes down to the judges. Like, judges are the reason that an area becomes a judicial hellhole. Judges have a commitment to being unbiased arbiters in the pursuit of truth and justice, and they are to ensure that litigation is fair, predictable, and won or lost on the facts presented. And plaintiffs are to have the burden of proof put on them, as they're the ones bringing forward the claim, and the rights of both parties aren't to be compromised. Judicial hellholes, they systemically fail to adhere to core judicial tenets or principles of law. And some of the tricks to being able to do that include, in like pretrial rulings, forum shopping, which is allowing personal injury lawyers to file cases in an area even if no connection to the jurisdiction exists. It's often backed up by lax venue laws, but we'll get to that. That's important. Discovery abuse, allowing unnecessarily broad, invasive, and expensive discovery requests, which Hampton County still does. We'll also talk about that. Judges might also apply the discovery rules in an unbalanced way that denies the defendant, like the corporations and stuff, their right to learn about the plaintiff's case and what they have. Novel legal theories, they allow suits to go forward that are not supposed to because they're not supported by law, but they make up new legal theory that often have like inappropriate ramifications on like a massive level. In decisions during trial, they allow for excessive damages to be paid out, like just absolutely ridiculously high amounts, like the $14 million awarded in a medical malpractice suit in Hampton that John Parker was a part of. They allowed junk science to be presented. So, like, they allow plaintiffs' lawyers to introduce expert testimony that claims to link to the defendant to the injury, but there's no credibility. Like, there's nothing there. And uneven application of evidentiary rules, allowing plaintiffs greater flexibility in the kinds of evidence that can be admitted at trial while rejecting evidence that might be favorable to the defendant. When it comes to judicial integrity, more often than not, in judicial hellholes, trial lawyer contributions as donations to locally elected judges has been able to influence their judicial decisions. Please keep in mind that at one point, one of the judges for the 14th Judicial Circuit did have a ton of money come in from the Murdaugh family. Also had donations come in from PMPED. As to which member of PMPED donated, we don't know, but it's an excessive amount, and it should not be that way. And then cozy relations, a revolving door among jurors, plaintiffs' lawyers, and government officials, which is basically what PMPED does. PMPED is the starting point for that revolving door. It's kind of impressive, but also really scary. But we'll get more into that later. When it comes to forum shopping, Hampton County became a huge destination for those seeking to file civil suits due to extraordinarily lax venue laws. Like, South Carolina was terrible about that. And PMPED themselves had great success fighting venue changes in court previously. For example, the lawsuit that is on my screen. In 1996, James Bryan Cook fell out of a 1987 Chevy Blazer to his death. In the wrongful death action filed in Hampton County by John Parker and Ronnie Crosby of PMPED for Judy Breland, the personal rep of James Cook, the venue chosen was Hampton, as both GM and Judy Breland had residence there. Love Chevy, they were like, we don't have residence there, we're in Lexington, which is true. But apparently it didn't matter. GM and Love Chevy, they tried to argue that the venue should be changed to Lexington County, since Love Chevy is a resident there and GM is a foreign corporation. In a hearing on June 3rd, 98, a trial court found that GM was a resident of Hampton based on South Carolina's law, which at the time, Section 15-30 read, in all cases, the action shall be tried in the county in which the defendant resides at the time of the commencement of the action. If there be more than one defendant, then the action may be tried in any county in which one or more of the defendants to such action resides at the time of the commencement of the action. If none of the parties shall reside in the state, the action may be tried in any county which the plaintiff shall designate in his complaint. The section is subject, however, to the power of the court to change the place of trial in certain cases as provided by law. So they filed in Hampton because GM is Hampton residents according to them. and so is Judy. Hey, Reaper. So during that trial, it was ruled that GM had enough, quote, substantial and continuous contacts to qualify as a resident of Hampton based on their 50-year relationship with a local car dealership. Which is wild. Just because they have a relationship with a car dealership, they were granted residence to be able to be tried in court. GM and Love Chevy, they filed a notice of appeal on the matter on July 31st of 98, but the appeal was dismissed following the plaintiff's motion to dismiss on the grounds that the trial court's order was interlocutory, there you go, and not immediately appealable. And that means that it was a non-final temporary order issued during the course of litigation. Just so you know. In March 2000, it was determined by the South Carolina Supreme Court that GM and Love Chevy did not have the right to immediately appeal the decision on venue, which is ridiculous. Now, the Supreme Court did their best to resolve some of the ambiguities of the venue law and would use the service of process law to try to determine domestic corporate residence, which is 15-9-210A, which reads: the domestic business or nonprofit corporation's registered agent is the agent of the corporation for service of any process, notice, or demand required by law to be served, and the service is binding upon the corporation. But it doesn't answer the question about what counts as a residence for foreign corporations. And more often than not, it really was up to the judge to decide if they wanted to use the venue law or if they wanted to use this law to determine what counts as residence for lawsuits filed in their county, which should not, it was so vague. It shouldn't have been that vague, but I digress. Now, in January 2001, Gerald C. Smoke Sr., a state judge of the previous 10 years and someone who presided over several cases from PMPED, joined the law firm. He left his judgeship and joined the law firm. On February 14th, 2001, John Parker and Randolph Randy Murdaugh IV filed a lawsuit against CSX Transportation, the rail company, in Hampton County on behalf of Danny Whaley. This was one of 46 lawsuits filed against CSX in Hampton County between 1990 and 2001. 46 lawsuits filed by PMPED against CSX in Hampton. Now, in order to determine whether or not Hampton was the proper venue, they relied on previous case law, which determined 3 locations where a corporation's residence may be established for the purpose of venue, which is the county where a domestic corporation has its principal place of business, county where a domestic or foreign corporation maintains an office and agent for the transaction of business, or a county where a domestic or foreign corporation owns property or transacts business. Because CSX ran on the railroad through Hampton County, and because they sometimes stopped in Hampton County to deliver stuff, they decided, yeah, that's, you own property and transact business there. That was their basis. PMPED was able to use that, them just stopping the train to deliver goods and services, as transacting business, therefore they have residence. In other counties, you wouldn't see things like that. It was just in Hampton and the 14th Judicial Circuit where they would find these little loopholes and maintain this really plaintiff-friendly area. And since 1995 up until 2001, CSX had paid out $18.8 million alone in verdicts and settlements. In Hampton. Other cases that were filed during this time included a suit by PMPED against GM and Ohio-based Cooper Tire and Rubber after a woman rolled her GMC Safari van and suffered injuries in Tennessee. The venue was Hampton because products made by GM and Cooper Tire were sold in Hampton. In 2001, 610 civil suits were filed in Hampton County, more than twice the number of similarly sized counties. And John Parker gave an interview to Forbes magazine in 2002, in which he said that his connections with judges, prosecutors, the community as a whole, did not give him an edge in the courtroom. He said that defense lawyers can always request a change in venue or ask that the judge recuse himself and, quote, "We don't live in a world where people don't have relationships," end quote. But as we can see by Whaley, Breland, countless other cases, venue changes don't happen. Like, they just don't happen in Hampton, as they find loopholes to be able to keep them there. And that's resulted in most corporations settling before even going to court. Walmart had actually purchased land in Hampton County to build a new store, and plans were developed to do so, but a lawyer in Columbia was like, "Hey, look, if you go there, you put all of South Carolina's stores at risk because of this, because of John Parker, because of his law firm, and all of their suits." So Walmart backed out. This caused the town of Varnville to lose over 200 potential jobs, $8 million in investments, and all of that potential tax revenue. SMI Steel, CSX, Duke Power, Chevron Phillips, and other corporations, like, they tried to lobby for change in legislation, but it was stopped by John Parker and his buddies at the Good Old Boys Club under the Murdaughs. Now, this name, y'all are going to hear this one a lot because not only did he testify against Alex Murdaugh, but he's helping sue him. Attorney Mark Tinsley. In a false arrest case he filed against Walmart for a suspected shoplifter, used subpoena power to try and intimidate, which is something that has been used as a tactic by multiple lawyers in the area, even to this day. Mark Tinsley admitted on the stand to using subpoena power to put pressure on Alex Murdaugh. Like, it's a whole thing. Hey, Beck. Oh, yeah, I know he does. I'm talking about right now back in 2003-ish. 2002, 2003 is where we're at right now. But yeah. So Mark Tinsley, back in this time, he subpoenaed, during this Walmart suit that he had filed for the false arrest case, he subpoenaed Hampton County Council member Lee Bowers for any communication he had with Walmart, the town of Varnville, CSX Transportation, or others relating to changing South Carolina venue laws. He also subpoenaed Don DeLoach, mayor of Varnville, a second Hampton County council member, several local defense attorneys and lobbyists, Walmart representatives, an officer of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, all on their activities related to venue reform, under the claim that he was trying to see if they were engaged in a conspiracy to pollute the jury pool. That's fucking ridiculous. That should not be a power that you were able to have, but in Hampton County, because it was a judicial hellhole, he was able to do such a thing and not be stopped. John Parker, in that Forbes interview I was talking about from 2002, said that the claim that companies are avoiding Hampton because of the lawsuits primarily brought on by his firm / the Murdaugh firm is a propaganda tool, and said that if anyone can find such a company, he will promise to not sue if it moves to Hampton and represent the company free of charge. That's suspicious as hell. You should not talk like that. And then the Forbes article also gave us a small look into what was going to be happening in 2002, which is the county will be holding a referendum on penny sales tax. And of the proceeds, $2 million would be used to renovate the lovely but deteriorating 124-year-old county courthouse. And Parker's wife, a county council member, had volunteered to help oversee the $3 million project, and the Parkers had agreed to chip in the extra $1 million required for the restoration. So it's a bit more complicated. Just a tiny bit more complicated. You see, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you go to either USC or Clemson for law school. You need to make sure that you either join up at PMPED in some sort of administrative capacity before you move along to working at the 14th Solicitor's Office, or you can get an administrative job at the 14th Solicitor's Office. You need to make sure that if you're a member of the police force, you go on the annual hunt, which we will talk about in just a little bit, because John Marvin hosts those. So there's a process. But it always starts out with USC or Clemson for law school, and either getting in on the ground floor at PMPED or at the 14th Solicitor's Office. Or one of the sheriff's offices. Let's not lie. So, now there was a lot of changes that started to happen in 2005 in terms of judicial hellholes. So, wrong one. There we go. So, in February 2005, the South Carolina Supreme Court issued a ruling on the appeal of Whaley versus CSX. In this ruling, owning property and transacting business and the case law that determined that for venue were overturned and deemed insufficient to establish residence of a corporate defendant for venue purposes. Quote, CSX is incorporated under Virginia law and its principal place of business is Florida. Although CSX owns property and transacts business in Hampton County, it does not maintain an office and agent for the transaction of business there. Therefore, the trial court erred in finding that venue was proper in Hampton County. CSX argues that even if it did reside in Hampton County, its motion to change venue should have been granted based on the convenience of witnesses and the ends of justice, and the Supreme Court agreed. Which is huge, because that overturned and took out so many pieces of case law that Hampton County used to be able to hold all of their big corporate lawsuits there. And then The Economic Development, Citizens, and Small Business Protection Act of 2005 passed and went into effect on July 1st, 2005, which changed South Carolina Code of Law 15-7-30 to properly explain venue and amend Title 15, Chapter 7 through Section 100 to determine what can and cannot be tried and where. As you can see. Isn't it beautiful? Checking now, lizard. I'll have to download that. So, in August 2005, Maggie Murdaugh wrote her last will and testament, which, mind you, this is right after the new laws for Title 15, Chapter 7 of the South Carolina Code of Law. This is like right after that, because that went into effect on July 1st. She writes her last will and testament in August. But anyway. So originally, Marion Proctor, her sister, was the person to handle the estate when she passes. That was crossed out about a week later, and Maggie wrote in Randolph Murdaugh III, her father-in-law, the solicitor for the 14th Judicial Circuit, the guy that still owns the law firm, because there are rules in place to allow for people to have dual practices and be lawyer legislators in South Carolina, which is just terrible, but we'll talk about that on the Judicial Circuit stream. And according to her will, everything was to be left to Richard Alexander Murdaugh Sr. Mind you, at the time, Buster and Paul were little. This was 2005. But this is really important, because this will come into play later. But she divides and bequeaths all of her property of every nature to Richard Alexander Murdaugh Jr., Buster, and Paul Terry Murdaugh in the event that her husband predeceases her, or in the event his death shall occur at the time of her death. Oh, that's fine, Reaper. If you fall asleep, then you fall asleep. Gotta take care of yourself. But however, should they be under the age of 22, then everything goes to Marion B. Proctor in trust for support, maintenance, and education of the children, with the specific instruction that any transaction may be specifically for the benefit of them, and them only. So, if Maggie dies before Alex does, all it goes to him. If he dies before the children do, or before she does, or at the same time she does, if they're under the age of 22, it goes to a trust. But if they're over the age of 22, it just goes to them. Paul was 22 when he was murdered. But we'll get to that. It's later. Don't worry. Now, also in 2005, Randolph Murdaugh III resigned from his position as solicitor of the 14th Judicial Circuit. So they changed the law in a massive way, and he resigns. And he goes back to working at the law firm. He goes back to PMPED. He goes back to his law firm. So, according to South Carolina Code of Law 1-7-390, quote, in case any circuit solicitor shall cease to reside in his circuit, his office shall become vacant. In case any vacancy shall occur in such office by death, resignation, or otherwise, the vacancy thereby created shall be filled by the governor by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. So, keeping this in mind, Duffy Stone, was selected by Mark Sanford, who was governor at the time, to take over the spot of 14th solicitor. Thing is, Duffy Stone had been an assistant at the 14th Judicial Circuit Solicitor's Office under Murdaugh for multiple years. He knew the Murdaugh family very well. He was friends with senators who had gone through all of this stuff with, getting into the good old boys club. He became buddies with them. They all became very well known. They all became real close. And yeah, he was elected to take over from Murdaugh. He was Murdaugh approved. Which is not fishy at all, right? No, it's not fishy. So, in the years following the venue law changes, February 16th, 2006, John Marvin Murdaugh purchased a property in 100 Pines for $210,000. 2 months later, he took out a loan of $275,000 on the property through Palmetto State Bank. March 7th, 2006, Randy purchased about 152 acres in Hampton along with Joseph Seckinger, the guy whose wife, Randolph Lafitte's sister, or Russell Lafitte's sister, the one that confronted Alex allegedly, yeah, her husband, and Jason McCoy. They all purchased that land together. And the actual acquisition deed, only Randy was listed. A separate correcting deed was added on March 29th, 2006, in order to add Seckinger and McCoy, which also McCoy later became a receiver for Alex's assets, but we will talk about that later. The same day, they sold it to Drywater LLC for $380,000. Joseph Seckinger appears to be, quote, Bobo Seckinger, owner of a timber products company and brother-in-law of Russell Lafitte, as I said. This property is on Sandy Run Road, the road on which Stephen Smith was found dead. We'll get to that too. No apparent connection between Drywater and anyone involved in any of this, but they are the ones that bought it, so they have to be mentioned. There are multiple land sales that happened between members of PMPED, Alex, Randy, John Marvin, the Bullwares, whom we know Alex stole money from, who we got the Moselle property from, throughout the next few years, with Palmetto State Bank acting as the loaning bank for the majority of these sales. On May 24th, 2007, Alex Murdaugh started Murdaugh Charters LLC, as you can see. Now, John Marvin Murdaugh got married March 2008. Naturally, Randolph III, Randy and Alex were involved in the wedding party, also included Russell Lucius Lafitte of Palmetto State Bank, because go figure, Russell's dad is John Marvin's godfather, and Randolph is Russell's godfather. Who knew? Michael Paul Thomas, who we know is John Marvin's sheriff department buddy over at Yosemite. You got Keith Randall Malfris Jr., who not only had ethics violations filed against him, but whose relatives, the Malfris family, are also very much closely tied with the 14th Judicial Circuit, our prosecution lawyers, and our judges. It's a thing. On June 2nd, 2008, John Marvin Murdaugh starts Black Sheep Sport Fishing LLC. Now, we know that John Marvin has 3 current Murdaugh rental companies. One in Ridgeland, one in Hampton, one in Walterboro. Which is funny because PMPED has a location in Ridgeland, Walterboro, and Hampton. Isn't that a fun coincidence, you guys? Isn't it also just really coincidental that most of John Marvin's business, from what I have seen, comes from him renting to like the local governments for tools to be used during renovation projects. Doesn't really seem to get much else. Occasional home renovations, stuff like that. Hey, John Marvin, how is your annual revenue approximately $648,000 a year in one of the poorest towns in South Carolina? How do you manage that? And rentals, they don't really happen too often down there. Like, there's no reason to when you have construction companies that have their own tools. And when the county government does pay you, it seems to be really cheap. It's like $247 was the last one I saw. Your Richland office has 1 employee and brings in an annual revenue of $400,000 plus. Isn't it odd? Also, Black Sheep Sport Fishing, what does that do? It's not a real company. At least not that we found. It just sort of exists and has existed since 2008. But anyway, on February 26, 2009, the Plyler case settles. As we know, the Plylers were 2 girls who lost their family in a car accident, and Russell Lafitte was made the conservator of the account for that settlement. Now, we know that Lafitte borrows money from this account, and so does Alex Murdaugh. And the excuse that Lafitte had in federal court that he didn't know that it was wrong is bullshit, because your family has been in banking like your whole life. Your family owns Palmetto State Bank. There is no way that you did not know. Just saying. Now, July 9th, 2009, there's an attempted arson at Alex Murdaugh's Holly Street home. The same home that is Murdaugh Charters is registered to. Yeah. There's an attempted arson. Quote, "We suspect that sometime Thursday night or Friday morning, someone spread some kind of accelerant around the house and tried to set it on fire from the back door. Luckily, for some reason, it didn't spread through the house, and the only thing that burned was the floor mat." End quote. Now, with all that we know about the insurance schemes and everything like that, it is entirely possible that this was an attempt at an insurance fraud scheme, but we do not have proof of that, so that falls under the allegedly pile. Allegedly. Now, January 11th, 2010, guess what? We got another company that's started by Alex Murdaugh. Eclipse Landscape and Design LLC. Also, no proof of them having conducted business. But we do know that he gets his insurance coverage from like Philadelphia Insurance and from Natilius, all that stuff. We know that like they said in legal filings that they were insured for a business. We don't know which business, but we do know that there's at least 4 registered to Richard Alexander Murdaugh that do not, they don't do business. It's weird. But I digress. So, April 13th, 2013, J.M. Boulware, Barrett Boulware's wife, transferred the Moselle property to Alex Murdaugh. Now, this is a common misconception about how much was actually paid. You see, as you can see, right here, right there, it says that it was in consideration of the sum of $5 for Moselle, but people miss the second part. Okay, so the second part here says, and the exchange of like-kind replacement property valued at $730,000, pursuant to International Revenue Code Section 1031. Now, that does not mean that they were able to sell the Murdaugh property or the Moselle property to Alex for $5. A like-kind exchange, which is governed by IRS Code 1031, is when a taxpayer exchanges real property for real property, and both properties are held for productive use in a trade or business or for investment. A net loss or gain is not recognized by the IRS, and taxes on those properties are deferred. Now, that does not mean that taxes do not get paid on the property ever. That just means that when you first make the trade, for the years following, it's at the time it was like a year and a half, 2 years following, your taxes were deferred because you didn't have that loss or gain. So they traded properties, and that explains why Alex has called Moselle a commercial hunting property, and not just the Moselle property is a commercial hunting property, because due to the like-kind exchange, it had to be held as a business or for investment. He put a house on it, commercial hunting lodge. There you go. Okay. We're about to get into serious stuff because we have made it to Stephen Smith. Yeah. So, on July 8th, 2015, Stephen Smith was found dead on Sandy Run Road in Hampton. When Stephen Smith was initially found, it was reported that the only injuries to the victim were around the head area. It was initially a suspected hit and run, but SLED, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, was called in about 2 hours after Stephen's body was initially found, as it was changed to a suspected homicide, and there was possibly a gunshot wound to Stephen's head. It was noted at 8:25 a.m. that an EMS worker stated that a projectile wound was located on the victim's head, and that the Hampton County Coroner's Office moved the victim prior to SLED crime scene arrival. Quote, a hole in the skull was located above the victim's right eye. It was still unclear at this time if the hole was caused by a projectile. The victim's right arm was covered in blood, and agents were unable to see any injuries, end quote. That is from a SLED report. SLED agents noted minor injuries to his left arm, left hand, and head. Stephen's vehicle was found about 3 miles away with the gas tank door open and the gas cap off. Stephen's wallet was found in the car. Now, a few hours later, at about 11:30 in the morning that same day, the Medical University of South Carolina conducted an autopsy on Stephen, and the report was finished at about 12:30 p.m., so a little after lunch, and it found the cause of death was blunt head trauma due to, quote, motor vehicle crash, end quote, multiple injuries and cuts on his arms and hands, blood in his airways, a dislocated right shoulder. Quote, in light of historical information and the autopsy findings, it is the opinion of the pathologist that the descendant died as the result of blunt head trauma sustained in a motor vehicle crash in which the descendant was a pedestrian struck by a vehicle, end quote. The South Carolina Highway Patrol, however, did not agree with the findings of the autopsy and called for the funeral home to leave the body as is and not do anything further, and they began their own investigation. Stephen's family, when told about Stephen being hit by a car, rejected the notion that he would have been hit by a car. July 14th, 2015, the first of 3 death certificates for Stephen Smith is issued. On the certificate, they listed that his time of injury and actual or presumed time of death was 3 in the morning. The cause of death was blunt force trauma, probably pedestrian in motor vehicle accident, possibly struck by side mirror. Manner of death was pending investigation, and how injury occurred, subject was apparently hit by a motor vehicle, possibly a truck. July 17th, 2015, is the first mention of the Murdaughs in the investigation into the death of Stephen Smith. A family member in an interview with the South Carolina Highway Patrol told police that Randy Murdaugh was the second person to call Stephen's father after the coroner on the day of Stephen's death. He said he would take Stephen's case free of charge. The family was skeptical of Randy's offer and thought it was weird. I would too. Imagine, your son just died. You just got off the phone with the coroner, and fucking Randy Murdaugh calls you, and he doesn't know you like that? He just heard of the case and called you? That's weird. You don't do that. Skip ahead. Oh, well. But I digress. Stephen's family said that they just officially left the house for the first time. Like, the person he was interviewing had just gone out for the first time since Stephen's death the day before, and went to the store, and a bunch of people kept coming up to her saying, "Did you know the Murdaugh boys are behind it?" Saying Buster, the one we went to school with, and some of his friends. Quote, "I'm just sitting here like, why? It makes no sense," she said. "He's never said anything bad about Stephen. He's never been around Stephen," end quote. When asked who told her, she said that Stephen's friend, another kid who she named, and, quote, a couple other people told her that Buster Murdaugh was involved. The officer did not make note of the Murdaugh tip in his written notes. It was in the recorded video, but was not included in his notes. Sandy Smith, Stephen's mother, had her interview the same day. She heard rumors about the Murdaugh boys having something to do with Stephen's death. Quote, "The rumor that's going around Hampton that everybody keeps coming up to me and saying it was Murdaugh boys," she said. Duncan, the interviewer, didn't follow up with any questions and never mentioned the rumor in his case notes. They're mentioned in the recorded interviews, but they're not put in the actual case notes. When you make a FOIA request for these types of paperwork and for this type of case information, it's generally more expensive to get the recordings. It's more expensive to get the audio or the video. So if a private citizen or a corporation that's just like, or like a local news organization that's very independent, self-run, they won't be able to get those audio recordings. They won't be able to afford it. So what they'll end up doing is they'll get just the paperwork, and the paperwork makes no mention of Murdaugh. So when they report on Stephen Smith being dead, you have all of this information that's going to be missed because these officers are not putting it down in their case files on purpose. Hey, Miss Parker. Oh, I'm glad you got the baby down. Hopefully no more puke today. Hopefully no puke on your keyboard. So, July 22nd, 2015, Investigator Proctor goes to MUSC to get some sort of clarification on the Smith case. The pathologist, Dr. Aaron Presnell, spoke to him in a negative tone and, quote, basically called him a liar when he said he had already spoken to Hampton County Coroner Ernie Washington. Oh, no, that's not good. Oh, I hope it's nothing and he feels better soon. It's just like the weather changes getting to him real bad. And yes, babies do suck. So, August 18th, 2015, Investigator Proctor speaks with Coroner Washington. Oh, so right now we're talking about the death of Stephen Smith. Buster and the Murdaughs were first brought up like right after Stephen died because Randy was the second person to call Stephen Smith's mom or dad. Sorry, he was the second person, Randy, and was like, "I'll take his case free of charge." Then that's weird. You don't do that. And then Buster was mentioned, but he was only mentioned in the audio recordings. They never put it inside of the actual case file, like the notes, which is also weird. Yeah, that one. Now, Hampton County Coroner, or Deputy Coroner, my mistake, Kelly Green, and a SLED agent who both attended the autopsy, reported that they never made any reference to him being struck by a vehicle, only that he was found in the road. Now, mind you, Kelly Green was fired sometime between July 22nd and August 18th of 2015. She was the person that was in charge of the chain of custody for Stephen's clothes and everything in regards to Colleton in the state. So, but the coroner, Washington, stated that he made contact with Dr. Presnell, the pathologist, and she said she would be willing to change her report to read however he wanted it. Ma'am, you are a Medical University of South Carolina pathologist. You're the doctor. You are supposed to be able to make these calls and have a report that reflects your official findings. What? What? Now, the full details of the Stephen Smith investigation are far too much to include in this stream because for this part of the stream, we will make it up to the murders, and then we'll start at the murders tomorrow. But if anyone would like a stream just on the full Stephen Smith investigation with all of the details that I have found, I will gladly do one. However, for now, I will skip to important pieces as they pertain to the mentioning of Buster Murdaugh. Now, September 2nd, 2015, a man called Kevin met up with investigator Proctor. Kevin said he heard it was Buster Murdaugh. And that was, quote, kind of out of character to who I knew. He said the person who told him this, though, said Buster was on drugs. Kevin said that he would hate to only be able to give hearsay because the main thing is, whether that is the case or not the case, there's still somebody who lost a child, lost a brother, lost a family member, and that's just not right. Proctor asked Kevin who he heard it from, and he, for just this, a dude named Jack. Okay, Jack. Kevin says that Jack told him Buster and a guy named Trevor tried to sell him cocaine at a party at Moselle. Kevin said that Trevor just moved to Oklahoma, which is weird. And it's a very strange coincidence that he just moved to Oklahoma after the death of Stephen Smith. But it's just weird. Now, Proctor says that he had heard that Buster and the guys were coming back from a baseball game. And Kevin said that Buster and whoever was with him were coming home from the Murdaugh's house in Moselle on 601. Proctor asked if Kevin knew if Buster was driving. He said he would imagine so, adding that Kevin was usually the one to drive when his friends were driving around. Buster used to drive a Suburban, but would sometimes drive a black F-150 or an F-250. Kevin said he had no idea who else was in the car. Now, we do know that the Murdaughs had the Suburban, which was usually driven around by Alec. And then there's also the black F-150 or F-250. I do believe it was an F-250 according to the documents. But yeah. So we know those are their vehicles. They've had them a long time. Quote, I feel like they wouldn't want anything to happen to their reputation, Kevin said. Kevin has gone to South Carolina football games with them, and he said that he'd hate to throw names out there, but what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. Investigator Proctor said, quote, I think it's a situation when you grow up and your family is kind of high profile and you get away with some things because of your family name and you're given things, you become invincible in a way. And you get a little liquor and you think you're untouchable. I think that it happened, they freaked out, and maybe it's just trying to get covered up at this point, end quote. That is from Investigator Proctor of the South Carolina Highway Patrol. Anyway, Kevin then says that the Smiths deserve the truth. Proctor said that Buster was on their radar long before Kevin was. The Murdaughs knew that. They know he's on the radar. And that what Kevin was saying was valuable information. But the thing is, we know that Buster was on the radar, but Buster's name was never put into the reports. His name was only mentioned in the audio, which most independent news sources would not be able to get, and most major news sources only go after the paperwork in their FOIA requests. Isn't it odd? So Kevin told Proctor about how the Murdaughs have big parties at their houses every weekend or every other weekend, including kids from Varnville and Bamberg, anywhere you could think of. The party spot was in Hampton at the Moselle property. And he's gone to one of the parties there. He said that it's known for, quote, a lot of fights, alcohol, drugs kind of thrown in there at the same time, end quote. On Paul, Kevin said that when he originally heard about Stephen's death, he thought it was Paul that they were talking about, because he's more the, I don't want to say troublemaker. He's more the, my last name is Murdaugh, I can do whatever. Kevin said that, 2015, he was either a junior, possibly a senior in high school. He said that Paul used to be called Little Paul. And Kevin said that he was hesitant to give the names out of the Murdaughs because, quote, I'm not scared of these people, but I definitely don't want them knowing that I had anything to do with this. I just don't want to get into all that because Hampton is a small town, end quote. He said that he can't really say anything bad about them. They were nothing but nice, but he can't help if it's the truth. Your name can't carry you but so far. Now, Investigator Proctor said that he's not saying the Murdaugh boy did it because he doesn't know yet. But if they're going to start throwing out names, he's not going to withhold his name because of who he is. His name's going to be out there just like anybody else's name that is on his radar, and he doesn't care who knows it. He claims to not care if Buster and them know that Buster is on the radar, but the rumors about Buster were not included in any written reports. Following that interview with Kevin, Inspector Proctor discussed it with, like, the whole Buster thing with 3 other people. Jack, Mia, Kayla, who also had pretty much the same things to say. October 20th, 2015, Inspector Proctor called Buster. The note on the report reads, quote, didn't answer voicemail full, end quote. His attempt to call Buster was not recorded. He then attempted to email Buster. This is the only time that the Highway Patrol attempted to speak to Buster. In the course of their investigation into Stephen Smith, with his name being thrown around as often as it was, they attempted to speak to him once. And that's it. November 24th, 2015, Sandy Smith, Stephen's mother, did an interview with the Hampton County Guardian. She said that it didn't make sense that he was struck in the head by a truck mirror, allegedly. She couldn't see it happening. He would have gotten out of the way. The reports state that he was walking in the middle of the road and was found 2.7 miles from his car. The way his body was laying in the road with his arm dislocated and bent back behind his body, she does not believe that he was struck by the mirror of a vehicle. Ooh. You have a new case? I'm interested. She went on to state that, in her opinion, if her son was indeed struck by a mirror, that there would be pieces of broken plastic or glass on the ground or in his wounds, which there were not. She also said in the article that rumors regarding her late son had circulated around town, and not just about his tragic and extremely brutal death, but questions regarding his sexual preferences had been whispered among the town residents following his death. She said that Stephen was in the process of discovering himself and his sexuality. He was gay. One rumor that he may have had a man stalking him. The authorities had asked her about it, but she heard other stories that she believes more. Quote, I guarantee you that Stephen was not in that road. They took him from his car. Everybody knew his car because he had the ugliest little banana car in town. These boys were coming home from a baseball game, and I think that they were right behind him. So when he had to pull over, they were right there. I just don't believe my son would have been walking in the middle of the road like that. He would have seen headlights coming and got off the road. It just doesn't make any sense. The worst part is that some of the individuals responsible were Stephen's classmates. This was a fight that he didn't have a chance to win. I know my son, and he was strong. One person didn't do this because Stephen would have fought back. I had to go to the governor to take my case because I wasn't getting anything done here. It's not coming back to Hampton. The governor will not let state police close the case because if the case is closed, it will come back to Hampton County. There are too many big names involved for it to come back to Hampton. It is going to require a change of venue." End quote. She was offering rewards up to $1,000 for tips about the death of her son because she knew that it was hard to come forward with information in a small community. She also guaranteed that the information would remain anonymous. She just wanted to know the truth behind her son's death. That's all she wanted to know. Oh no, Miss Parker, you're trying to get me in trouble? Oh Lord, you're going to get me in trouble. I'm already in trouble. All right. I'll start work on it this week. So, because I already have all this like stream stuff written up for this. So, yeah, you're going to get me in trouble. You're really good at it. All right. So, on September 28th, 2016, Sandy Smith wrote a letter. She wrote a letter to the FBI. In her letter, she said that authorities flip-flopped between theories when they told the Smiths the news of Stephen's death on July 8th. Stephen's father, her ex, who is now deceased, and I were first told that our son was shot to death after running out of gas in the early hours of the morning and exiting his vehicle, he wrote. Later that day, we were told it was a hit and run. Finally, investigators determined he was beaten to death. In the letter, Sandy said that she was getting mixed messages from authorities in the immediate aftermath of Stephen's death. Quote, Hampton investigators asked us at the time to continue to publicly say it was a hit and run. They claimed they didn't want the killer to know they were looking for him. There have been no named suspects, end quote. She pointed out discrepancies in the 911 log, said that investigators failed to access Stephen's phone, disputed MUSC pathologist's theory that Stephen was hit by a car, and submitted multiple documents from the case file with a plea to have the investigation open. Quote, we desperately need your help. This investigation is being deliberately derailed. We need someone to hold the investigators accountable and access Stephen's phone, end quote. The FBI did not open a case, but we'll get to that after the murders. And we're going to cover the murders tomorrow, so hooray. Now, December 21st, 2016, we get a lovely article written. We get an article written about John Marvin Murdaugh. In the article, it is revealed that every year, John Marvin hosts a hunt at his hunting ground in Varnville for officers at the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, the South Carolina Highway Patrol, Richland Police Department, and several Hampton County municipalities. Hampton County, of course, being where the Murdaughs established their law firm and have had a hand in all of the dealings with the 14th Judicial Circuit since the time that it was incepted. Because, as I've said before, the Murdaugh law firm was founded in 1910, and the 14th Judicial Circuit did not exist until 1916. Now, the Yesemi chief of police Yemassee, and the Hampton County Chief of Police were in attendance. Quote, when the sun set and darkness fell, the group gathered around a large fire and enjoyed dinner and laughter amongst colleagues and friends. Murdaugh stated that he intends to host another hunting excursion for officers in the future, which may hopefully give certain high-ranking officers enough time to properly sight their firearms, end quote. On May 29th, 2017, Paul Murdaugh was charged by South Carolina Department of Natural Resources officers in Beaufort County with the purchase or possession of beer or wine by a minor. Two of Paul's friends, who happened to be present in the 2019 boat accident, were also charged. Alex Murdaugh and his good buddy Corey Fleming represented Paul. The charges were filed officially May 31st. Alex and Fleming requested a jury trial on June 29th. The trial was rescheduled 5 times between July and November of 2017. Now, February 2nd. There you are. Okay, so February 2nd, 2018, Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh's longtime housekeeper, had a, quote, slip and fall accident at the Murdaugh property, the details of which have been uncertain since the time that it happened. The 911 call for that incident has been released, and Paul and Maggie they don't sound happy about the questions that are asked of them. And we can listen to that, like, right now.
911, where's your emergency? 4147 Moselle Road. Okay, can you give me the address one more time, make sure I got it right? Yes, 4147 Moselle Road. Okay, what's going on out there? I'm sorry? What's going on out there? My housekeeper has fallen and her head is bleeding. I cannot get her up. Okay, you said she's fallen. She's bleeding from the head? Yes. Okay. How old is she?
Hey, Pharaoh.
I'm not sure, like 58 maybe. Do you know if she fell from standing or not? No. No. Where'd she fall from? She fell going up the steps, up the brick steps. Okay, so she outside or inside? Outside. Okay. How many steps is there? 8. Okay, is she on the ground or is she up near the top? She's on the ground. She's on the ground. She's on the ground. Is she conscious? No, not really. Is she awake at all? Yes. Okay. Is she just not, like, responding appropriately, but she is awake? Man, she's not responding. Okay, I've already got them on the way. Me asking questions does not slow them down, man. Knowing if she's conscious is one of the things that the medic needs to know if she's responding at all to you. No. Okay, so she's not responsive at all. Well, I mean, she's mumbling. Okay, so she is somewhat conscious. Is she breathing okay? Yes. Is she bleeding from anywhere? Yes, her head. Okay, are you guys able to control the bleeding? No. Can you put a clean rag or anything on it? Yeah, I got it. Okay, is she bleeding from, like, her face, the back of the head? I've got an ambulance coming. Sir, my name what? Where exactly is she bleeding from on her head? I'm not sure, at the top of her head. Okay. Okay. Oh, gosh. What happened? She just fell back down. Can I get off this phone so I can go down there? Can I have your name and phone number? Or are you able to bring the phone down by her? What? Or are you on a cell phone where you can walk down there and talk? I'm on a cell phone. No. Okay, can you bring it with you so we can ask her some questions about what kind of pain she's having?
Hello?
Yeah. Can you ask the patient what kind of pain she's having?
Ma'am, she can't talk.
Okay. Do you know?
She's cracked her head and there's blood on the concrete and she's bleeding out of her left ear.
Okay, she's bleeding out of her ear.
And out of her head. She's cracked her skull.
Okay. All right. The other lady said that she had tried to stand up and fell down again.
No, I was holding her up. And
okay.
She told me to turn her loose and she was trying to use her arm, but then she fell back over.
Okay. Do you guys know who she is?
Yes, she works for us.
Okay. Do you know if she's ever had a stroke or anything before?
Ma'am, can you stop asking her these questions?
I already have them on the way. Me asking questions does not slow them down in any way. These are relevant questions that I have to ask for the ambulance. One of my questions is, has she ever had a stroke?
I don't believe she's ever had a stroke now that I know
that. Okay. Is she able to talk to you guys at all, or is she unconscious now?
She's not unconscious. She's just mumbling.
Okay.
I believe she's maybe hit her head and maybe has a concussion or something.
Okay.
Maybe.
Do you know what her name is?
Gloria Satterfield.
You said Sanderfield?
Ma'am?
You said Sanderfield?
Satterfield.
Satterfield. Okay. What's the house look like out there?
It's offset off the road.
Okay.
It's a big house, got a wide driveway.
With a long driveway?
Yeah.
Is there a gate or anything down there that they're going to need to come through?
There's two big brick columns that have to come through.
Okay, but there's no, gate code or anything that they need?
No, ma'am. And tell them that they can look for a fellow on a 6x6 Ranger.
Okay.
Waiting on them in the road. It's green. You know what they probably know what the Ranger looks like.
Yeah. You said
Fella's
green.
got on a black sweater, a hat, and pants.
Okay. All right. If something changes with her, if she loses consciousness or anything like that, I need one of you guys to call me back right away, okay?
Okay, well, how long is it going to take? Because this took us...
That I don't know. I've had them on the way since Maggie first called me. They were toned right away.
Okay.
All right, but I think they're coming... Hang on 1 minute. Let me check. They're coming from somewhere on Belt Highway in Ruffin, okay? That's where their station is.
Thank you.
All right, but like I said, if something changes, call me back.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, Miss Parker, that wasn't Alex on the phone. That was Paul. That was Paul Terry Murdaugh. Now, see, I don't think she was. Yes, Chris, that's what I'm clarifying right now. So, yeah, that was Paul. Now, a 911 call was just suspicious as hell. Yes, that was Paul on the phone. Paul was there that day, and Maggie was there that day. Maggie is the person that initially made the call to 911. She handed the phone over to Paul when she went to go help Gloria after Gloria fell the second time, because according to Paul, he was holding her up and then he let go and she fell again. Yeah, that was a thing that we just heard. So Gloria sustained a right side head laceration, a right side subdural hematoma, a traumatic brain injury, multiple left side posterior rib fractures, a partially collapsed lung, and a pulmonary contusion. A subdural hematoma is when you get this bleed right between the dura, which is that protective membrane around the brain and your brain. So it's bleeding right there. It's extremely dangerous. Prior to her death, She had surgery to repair her broken ribs and to reconstruct her chest wall and to remove significant blood in her chest cavity. On February 26, 2018, Gloria Satterfield died of the injuries sustained from that incident. Following Gloria's death, Alex Murdaugh introduced Gloria's son to Corey Fleming, his longtime friend, the godfather of his children, to file a wrongful death suit against Alex so they could get some money since Alex had insurance. Now, as I said before, we know of 4 companies that are opened up in Alex Murdaugh's name. We know that Moselle, because of the like-kind exchange with J.M. Boulware, is a commercial property. But none of these businesses actually do business. But they're insured. They just don't do business. So, on October 30th, 2018, Corey Fleming made what's called a Tiger River demand on Lloyd's of London, giving them until November 12th, 2018 to agree. No, I said, there you go. Oh, I don't need to see that yet. There we go. To agree to a full of the policy limits. Scott Wallinger, who was hired by Lloyd's of London to represent Alex in the suit, submitted a report on behalf of Alex that supported the full payout. Quote. Okay, yeah. Oh, that skipped way ahead. What happened? Sorry about that. Anyway, so, quote, Mr. Murdaugh does not want to be sued over this matter if practical and possible to avoid that, as he sees that a wrongful death lawsuit would be detrimental to him personally and professionally in that small rural community. Also stated in the report, quote, the injured Alexander Murdaugh is a third-generation lawyer practicing with his family's law firm in Hampton, South Carolina. Firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Ellsroth, and Dietrich is a preeminent plaintiff-only practice. The firm and its partners have a favorable reputation in that area of the state due to the firm's experience and influence and goodwill created in the county. It is highly likely we could get a suit venue transferred from Colleton County to Hampton County. Both of these counties sit within the 14th Judicial Circuit in South Carolina. The 14th Judicial Circuit is known to be a plaintiff-friendly circuit. Hampton County is among the most pro-plaintiff trial venues in South Carolina, largely because of the influence of Mr. Murdaugh's law firm in pursuing cases there. Colleton County is not considered quite as plaintiff-friendly as Hampton County. Given Mr. Murdaugh's involvement as a party, not as an attorney for the party, I tend to think Mr. Murdaugh would be very favorably viewed by a jury in Hampton County or in Colleton County. Absent a case being designated complex, cases are not assigned to particular judges in South Carolina. The 14th Circuit has 2 resident judges, Judge Perry Buckner and Judge Carmen Mullen. These judges know Mr. Murdaugh and Mr. Fleming well, end quote. We know that Judge Perry Buckner used to be an assistant at the 14th Judicial Circuit Solicitor's Office. We know that Perry Buckner III was elected to the 14th Judicial Circuit judgeship. We know that after being elected to that judgeship, John Parker bought out the Buckner law firm for PMPED at the approval of Randolph Murdaugh III, who was the solicitor at the time. The connections run deep. I digress. Now, Alex, Paul, and Maggie's information about what happened to Gloria did not match up and was extraordinarily suspect in all of the insurance filings. So Scott Wallinger's report stated that on February 2nd, 2018, Satterfield drove alone to the Colleton residence to see Mrs. Murdaugh and to pick up a check in payment for Satterfield's past services. Satterfield walked up alone to the front brick steps of the house and allegedly fell backwards down the steps due to being pushed or tripped by one or more of Murdaugh's 4 pet dogs, which were roaming free at the time. No one witnessed Satterfield's fall. Mrs. Murdaugh was inside the house, heard a great commotion on the front porch, came out the front door and found Satterfield lying on the steps, bleeding from an open wound to her head. Satterfield told Mr. Murdaugh, who arrived soon after, that the dogs had tripped her up. Satterfield made no other statement to a witness about involvement of dogs. The 4 dogs were Bubba, a 6-year-old male lab, who we know Bubba. Bubba's a good boy. Bubba's the best boy, and Bubba is the reason why we heard Alex's voice on the video in the murder trial, but we'll get to that. Bourbon is a 1.5-year-old female chocolate lab who's described as hyperactive. Blue is a 1-year-old male labradoodle and is Bubba's son. He is also described as hyperactive and constantly escaping. Sassy is a 6-month-old female German short-hair pointer puppy. She was acquired in January of that year and has not had training yet. Alex's interview said that he heard from, quote, one or more of Satterfield's relatives. He can't really recall, end quote, that Satterfield said the dogs tripped her. Maggie's interview says that she visited Gloria 5 or 6 times, but never alone. That Gloria told EMS the current president was Bill Clinton, and that Gloria never said why she fell. Paul's interview said that he remembers Alex arriving at the house and asking what happened, and that Satterfield said, quote, something about the dogs. We heard the 911 call, and we know for a fact that she was mumbling and not talking after her fall. After both of her falls, considering that Paul dropped her. In all of the interviews and reports, it was never clear if she was a full-time or part-time worker, but they were adamant that she showed up to pick up a check and not do any work, which would save them from a workers' compensation claim. The details of that day are still unclear, but we do know that the coroner for Hampton County disputed what is on her death certificate and disputed based on the information provided in the wrongful death lawsuit claim, and is the reason why part of the reason why SLED opened an investigation, but we will get to that. Because that doesn't happen until September 2021. We'll get there, don't worry. It'll take a couple streams, but we'll get there. Now, May 2018, Paul Murdaugh is sentenced to attend an alcohol diversion program for his May 2017 alcohol charges. July 5th, he completes the program, and his charges are dismissed and expunged. Per South Carolina's pretrial intervention program. Why that's a thing that is allowed to happen here, I don't know. Now, the image right here, this is super important. Because on July 6th, 2018, Barrett Boulware granted power of attorney to Alex Murdaugh, authorizing his attorney and business partner to, quote, lease, let, take possession, bargain, sell, assign, convey, pledge, mortgage, and encumber, repair, insure, and generally manage any and all property, both real and personal, which he owns or may hereafter require from any source, end quote. Of course, in South Carolina, in order for a legal document to be recognized and go into effect, it has to be stamped. It has to be formally submitted. This went into effect on July 9th, 2018. This authorized Murdaugh to sign, execute, and deliver any and all legal documents in Boulware's name, and to deposit any monies received from any source whatever for him in his name with any bank, and to draw and deliver checks in his name against said monies and other monies to be deposited in his name or to his credit. Boulware further authorized Murdaugh to, quote, do all things necessary concerning any insurance policies, including the right to change beneficiary, end quote, and was even granted control over decisions regarding his health and health care. Finally, the document made clear any decisions made by Murdaugh regarding Boulware's assets would be binding on himself and his heirs. It's baffling to me why he would grant power of attorney to Alex Murdaugh and not his wife. Why his wife was not in control of all of that, I do not know, and I probably will not know. We know that his wife is still alive. We know about that in 2021. We will also get to that. Now, December 19th, 2018, Chad Westendorf, as the personal representative for the estate of Gloria Satterfield, files a petition for approval of wrongful death settlement in Hampden County. Now, the personal representative of the estate should have been Gloria Satterfield's son, Michael Tony Satterfield. Tony trusted Alex. Tony, because his mom had worked for him for 20 plus years. His mom felt she was part of the family. So when Corey Fleming got Chad Westendorf here of Palmetto State Bank to be the personal representative, the person that had the bank account, this, that, and the other, he trusted him. He was like, oh, okay, sure. Like, he didn't know how this process worked. So Chad Westendorf filed the petition for the approval of the settlement. February 2019. So, February 23rd, 2019, Paul Terry Murdaugh is seen on security cameras at Parker's convenience store purchasing alcohol using his brother Buster's ID. Following this, he and his friends, Keith Anthony Cook, Connor Cook, Miley Altman, Morgan Dowdy, Mallory Beach, sorry, I almost said her mom's name, but Mallory Beach, they all get into the boat, go driving around, there is a crash, and we get this 911 call.
What bridge is it? Paul, what bridge is this? Paul, what bridge?
911, where's your emergency? Hello? Police, fire, EMS. Hello?
We're in a boat crash on Arthur Street.
Whereabouts on Arthur Street?
In Arthur Street, the only bridge on Arthur Street.
Archer Street?
Archer's Creek.
Archer's Creek. Archer's Creek. Is it? Okay. What's going on?
It's by Paris Island.
Right. What's going on?
We're in a boat crash.
You know what kind of a?
A boat crash.
A boat? Did you say a boat crash?
A boat crash.
Okay, so you're at the dock? Hello, are you at the dock?
No, we just crashed in a boat.
Okay, are you in the water or are you?
We're in the boat.
Okay.
We have someone missing.
Okay. Hang on 1 second, okay?
I'm calling in reference to a boat crash. There's 6 people on board. They currently have 1 missing. All right, it's in Archer's Creek, which is right there off of Paris Island. There's a bridge on Paris Island. They're underneath it. They crashed into the bridge.
Alpha 29, that's right.
10-4. I'll be en route to the Bell Bridge. Can you also notify Port Royal and the PMO know as well?
Affirmative, we're making notifications.
Okay, do you have a description of that person? It's 1 female. That's all the description I have of her right now.
EMS 1 respond to an accident with injuries. 50 Marina Drive Boulevard from Paris Island. Repeating. It's going to be a change in that location. They're on Malecon Drive, down right before you get to the traffic circle.
Copy. County's on scene, Port Royal's on scene. Evidently, the girl was sitting on her boyfriend's lap when they hit the bridge at a high rate of speed, and now she's missing.
Which bridge did they hit? The one on the causeway?
Stand by, sir. They hit the actual Paris Island Bridge, right? We don't know. They're not. They just keep telling us they hit the bridge. 310 got on scene. He said the fog is pretty thick. At first, he couldn't even find who they were. Find them.
Nope.
So, yes, that 911 person was a bit odd. She seemed very confused as well. Everyone in the situation was confused. There is another 911 tape that did come out that does include Keith yelling at Paul, telling him to quit laughing because that's his girlfriend that is missing, that they can't find. Yeah. So, following the crash, the first person that Paul called was his grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh III, who was still doing work for the solicitor's office. Under contract at that. So the police reported that the teenagers were heavily intoxicated when they arrived on the scene. Now, Beaufort County Sheriff's Office deputies that responded to the crash were Jason Malfris. If you remember, Malfris was at John Marvin Murdaugh's wedding as one of his groomsmen. And Jack Keener. And both of them had connections with the Murdaughs. Malfris, not only was he a part of John Marvin's wedding, but Alex was representing him at the time and continued to represent him after the accident. Keener was represented by PMPED in at least 3 lawsuits in the prior 6 years in which his family won $2.5 million. Keener wrote in his report that it was, quote, unclear who was driving, despite Paul being the only person identified as a possible driver at the scene of the crash. Officials at the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, the lead investigating agency, said that confusion in determining the driver delayed the investigation from the get-go. But statements from the 4 responding deputies indicate that none of the passengers ever told them it was anyone besides Paul that was driving. Keith Anthony Cook, Mallory's boyfriend, told police multiple times that Paul was driving and was heavily intoxicated. His cousin Connor said that Paul had refused to let him drive and that they were sitting on the bottom of the boat when they entered Archer's Creek, and Mallory was sitting on top of Anthony's lap because of how fast Paul was driving. At the time of the crash, the sheriff's office said it was merely the Beaufort Sheriff's Office said it was merely assisting the Port Royal, South Carolina Police Department, which had initial jurisdiction that night over the scene. Beaufort deputies were not dispatched to investigate the crash, because boat crashes are typically handled by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. But Keener appeared to be investigating and was giving detailed reports on what may have happened. Such as, quote, after looking at the damage of the boat, it appeared that the boat struck the Dolphin Navigation Aid cluster of pilings spaced out from the bridge to mark the channel, due to leaving a white scuff mark on it, end quote. He wrote that in a report. Neither Keener nor any other responding Beaufort County officer appears to have secured evidence at the scene, nor did any attempt to interview Murdaugh in front of a body-worn camera, as is protocol for other alcohol-related crashes. Now, Alex and Randolph III showed up at the hospital where everyone had been transported following the crash, minus Anthony Cook. Anthony Cook refused transport as Mallory was his girlfriend. She was missing. He wanted to stay there. So he refused transport. But multiple employees of the hospital witnessed Alex trying to orchestrate the kids into saying the same story. Here's an example. Alex even told Connor Cook that he would, quote, take care of it. One nurse saw Alex trying to make his way into Morgan Dowdy's room, Paul's girlfriend at the time. However, he was prevented to the best of the staff's ability from doing too much and going where he wasn't supposed to be. According to witnesses, Alex Murdaugh appeared to be more concerned with orchestrating a plan in the criminal investigation than finding Mallory Beach. In fact, a security guard overheard Alex Murdaugh on the phone saying, quote, she's gone, don't worry about her, end quote. Mallory had only been missing for a few hours at that point. She's gone, don't worry about her. Who says that? The charge nurse said that she could smell alcohol on Alex Murdaugh, according to SCDNR reports. She told a security guard to keep an eye on Alex Murdaugh because he was, quote, trying to enter other patients' rooms. It took emergency medical services, who were dispatched from just a few miles away, nearly 40 minutes to get to the scene of the boat crash because first responders were sent to the wrong bridge multiple times. Paul was also getting in the face of an officer on scene and saying, you think you're a bigger man than I am? According to witness statements. However, no police reports mention that. Several witness statements documented Paul's aggressive behavior towards EMS in the ambulance to Beaufort Memorial Hospital. A deputy with the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office was assigned to ride in the ambulance with Paul, and Paul received minor injuries. And they had to, quote, strap him down because of his behavior. Now, SCDNR officials, SCDNR officials did not administer or offer sobriety tests to the two boaters identified as possible drivers, Paul Murdaugh and Connor Cook. Mind you, at this time, all of the passengers have said that it was Paul. But officers decided that it must have been Connor, which is why they, quote, couldn't decide who it was. Keep that in mind. Now, alcohol was found on the boat, but tests were not administered because they didn't know who the driver was. And they said, excuse me, testing more than one person could result in the case being thrown out if charges were brought. But the South Carolina Office of the Attorney General has confirmed that that is not how that works. There is nothing prohibiting the testing of two people. The investigation would just need to prove, in the end, that one of the two individuals that were tested was driving. SCDNR spokesman Captain Robert McCullough said that tests were not offered because one of the individuals was in surgery and the other would not speak to investigators, which does not match up to what an SCDNR officer said before. And of course, as we know, the boat in question was registered to Alexander Murdaugh. Now, on February 25th, 2019, Solicitor Duffy Stone sent a letter to the South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson requesting that either Wilson's office or another solicitor's office in the state handle the boat case, as 3 of the victims were related to employees of the solicitor's office. Paul Murdaugh obviously is related to Randolph Murdaugh III, who at the time was still working under contract with the solicitor's office trying criminal cases. Not mentioned in this letter is Alex Murdaugh's, quote, volunteer position at the solicitor's office, as that type of position literally does not exist anywhere except apparently the 14th Judicial Circuit. Anthony Cook and Connor Cook were related to Chandler Cook, who was an administrative employee at the solicitor's office. Solicitor Stone said in his letter that as there is a possibility that charges may be brought and the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources may need legal assistance in their investigation, it should be reassigned. The Attorney General's office stated that, quote, if it comes to the point where there is a prosecution, we'll decide then whether our office will handle it or we'll assign it to another solicitor. So, Solicitor Stone did the absolute right thing in this situation. Hey, Lauren. So, crash happened. He knows that there's the potential for charges. He is the solicitor. He has the connections to the Murdaugh family. He steps away. That's good shit. But he does not keep that same energy later on. Now, I got a bit ahead of myself. Of course I did. I always did. But Officer Stephen Raynard of the Port Royal Police Department finalized his report from the boat scene on February 26, 2019. He made note that all 5 of the teens were grossly intoxicated. He stated that the Beaufort County deputies that arrived on scene prior to the Port Royal deputies were unable to identify the driver of the boat, but it was either Paul Murdaugh or Connor Cook. He said that there was blood in the main compartment of the boat, and the left side had a split in the hull from impact with the pylon in the water. And he reported that Keith Cook, Anthony, refused transport to the hospital as the missing passenger was his girlfriend. Now, on March 20th, 2019, Renee S. Beach, mother of Mallory Beach, the personal representative to the estate of Mallory Beach, files a wrongful death lawsuit in Beaufort County against Parker's, the store where the alcohol was purchased, Luther's Rare and Well Done Bar and Restaurant, Christy C. Wood, and James M. Wood, as allegedly all of the teens had gone to a party at Christy Wood and James Wood's house before they went out on the boat. On March 25th, 2019, the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office emailed the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, asking to be recused from assisting the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources in its investigation into where Paul and the boat passengers had obtained alcohol before the crash. Per South Carolina Code of Law 23-3-160, in any accident involving injury or death of a person under the age of 21, where there is cause to believe that any beverage containing alcohol was consumed prior to the accident by the person under the age of 21, law enforcement having jurisdiction to investigate the accident have to do a detailed investigation to determine the circumstances on how the alcohol was obtained. Once that investigation is started by local law enforcement, SLED will assist in whatever capacity needed to fully complete it, but it is the local agency's job to do that investigation. So Beaufort County, even though they didn't have jurisdiction, that was Port Royal. Port Royal had jurisdiction. Beaufort County showed up first without ever being dispatched, and it was 2 people that were associated with the Murdaughs. They decided to say, oh yeah, no, we're not going to look into how Paul got the alcohol. You already have your nose in it. Why pull out now? And Beaufort County was never even asked to conduct an investigation into where they had obtained the alcohol. The office just wanted to, quote, preempt any possible future request. Quote, considering Randolph was the solicitor for so many years, we have a lot of deputies who have worked closely with him on murder trials. It was the right thing to do to not be involved with the investigation. We wanted to make sure our position was known with the Murdaughs. We were making sure it was being done. Someone has to do it. End quote. Again, Beaufort County never had jurisdiction over this case. They got involved and responded to the scene the night of the crash itself and offered opinions and reports despite the direct connection between the 2 responding officers and the Murdaughs and Port Royal having jurisdiction. Fuckery abound. Officials with SCDNR, SLED, and the South Carolina Attorney General's office said that at the time they were unaware of any other recusals in the case outside of the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office, and the officials also said that no employees in their agencies had asked to be recused. March 29th, 2019. Renee S. Beach, mother of Mallory Beach, files a wrongful death lawsuit with the help of Mark Tinsley against Parker's, Luther's Rare and Well Done Bar and Restaurant, Christy C. Wood, James M. Wood, Alex Murdaugh, Buster Murdaugh, Randolph Murdaugh III as an individual and the trustee of the Murdaugh Residence Trust II and the Murdaugh Residence Trust II itself in Hampton County. The reason Randolph III and the Murdaugh Residence Trust II are named in the lawsuit is because before the crash, the group on the boat went to Randolph III's property called The Island to drink the alcohol that had been purchased by Paul. The Island is an asset of the Murdaugh Residence Trust II, of which Randolph III is a trustee. Now, Randolph III was also accused of allowing underage persons to drink on his property and then leave in an intoxicated state. It was alleged that the boaters drank alcohol that was also available for consumption on the island, and that Randolph III undertook a duty to supervise minors' consumption of alcohol so as to not allow them to unnecessarily endanger themselves or others, including Mallory Beach. Alex Murdaugh was accused in the lawsuit of failing to supervise his son when he knew or should have known his son was illegally using a license to buy and consume alcohol. Obviously, Buster, named in this because Paul used Buster's ID. April 8th, 2019. The Honorable Perry M. Buckner III, who we know has a lot of ties to the Murdaugh family, like a lot of ties, recuses himself from the Mallory Beach lawsuit and assigns Judge Carmen T. Mullen. We will learn more about her later on. Judge Carmen T. Mullen also recuses herself from the Mallory Beach lawsuit, leaving it up to the Chief Justice to assign a new judge. Also happening on April 18th is Paul Terry Murdaugh getting indicted on 2 counts of operation of a moving water device under the influence of alcohol or drugs resulting in great bodily injury, and 1 count of operation of a moving water device under the influence of alcohol or drugs resulting in death. I would hope that you're not related to Carmen Mullen, because she has a lot to answer for. She really does. And, oh no, Lauren, you want to hear a really, really, really rich white name? Maggie Murdaugh's name is Margaret Kennedy Bronstetter Murdaugh. That's a thing. So, he gets 2 indictments on the operation of moving water device under the influence, or a BUI, boating under the influence, resulting in great bodily injury. Yeah, imagine. But actually, it was the Attorney General's office that directly brought the charges. The AG's office was in charge of that. SLED was useless during this investigation. SLED's useless. I'm sorry, you guys. They really are sometimes. SLED has their high points, but when it comes to things like corruption within the judicial system, they are not exactly the best. You know what I mean? Now, following Paul's indictments, he did not get arrested. There's been a lot of question into how Paul was able to avoid being arrested following the indictments. And the reason that he wasn't arrested is because the Attorney General's office directly indicted him. So they were able to indict him, give him a first appearance time, which is a really weird loophole in the South Carolina justice system. If a grand jury indicts you on charges, then a warrant is issued for your arrest. You are arrested. But if the Attorney General brings those charges, then you just get notified of your court date. I don't know why that is, but it's fucky. Yeah. So, at the end of spring 2019 semester for colleges, Buster Murdaugh, who, like all of the men in his family before him, minus John Marvin, was pursuing his law degree at the University of South Carolina and was kicked out for plagiarism. May 6th, 2019, Paul Murdaugh has his first appearance/bond hearing for the boat accident indictments. The South Carolina Attorney General's Office prosecutor Megan Burstead put the following on the record in regards to Paul's alcohol use. Quote, "The standard condition of the bond is to not have crimes committed on bond and to assume that would include the underage use of alcohol. People handle stress differently, and it would be a concern of the state pending stress at trial that we would not have a misuse of alcohol. I don't know what parameters would be put in place for bond under the usual conditions, but for the record purposes, that is a concern of the state." End quote. Now, Paul Murdaugh's lawyers were, of course, Jim Griffin and Dick Poot. Harpootlian. Dick Poot. That's what I'm going to call him from now on. Okay. Dick Poot. So, Dick Poot made it a point that Paul did not have a criminal record, which was technically true. Because since he completed the pretrial intervention program in 2018, his record was expunged and the charges were gone. Quote, there is no allegations of anything affecting his mental condition, and his character in the community is very good. He has lived here all of his life and has no convictions and no record of flight to avoid prosecution, end quote. Judge Stephen John, who oversaw the hearing, set Paul's bond at $50,000. Once the judge set his bond, he was approached by a guard who was just trying to do his job. You know, handcuff him supposed to do after a bond hearing, and they're going to like and all that. There goes the officer. Approach him with handcuffs. He's told no by the Attorney General's office prosecutor. He's told no and walks away. She told him no to following the procedure of a criminal trial. Now, Paul was taken to the offices of the courthouse following this. No, go to the next one. Go. Yeah, there. Yep. You see that? That's Paul's mugshot. His mugshot was taken by someone's iPhone in front of a wall, still in his court clothes, but without his blazer on. Inmate intake photos in Beaufort County have said inmates in their orange jumpsuits, and they're taken at the jail, you know, as is procedure. After his mugshot's taken, he signs his personal recognizance bond paperwork with Jim Griffin and State Senator Defense Attorney Dick Poot. According to his bond paperwork, Paul was not allowed to leave the 14th Judicial Circuit. He could travel around there all he wants, but he couldn't leave. He also had to surrender his passport. There were no restrictions placed in regards to operating a boat or consuming alcohol. An officer brought an ink pad and what was described as a wooden thing to be able to get Paul's fingerprints the old-fashioned way. Instead of just going a few minutes down the road to the detention center. It's right down the road from the Beaufort courthouse. He could have done it the electronic way, the way that everyone else does it. But no. They managed to handle all of his charges and legal requirements for the court of law following criminal charges without ever having to step foot inside of the Beaufort County Detention Center. He did it all from the offices. But his family doesn't get, preferential treatment, guys. Now, May 13th, 2019, Judge Carmen T. Mullen, the same judge that recused herself from the Mallory Beach lawsuit, signs off on an order approving settlement in the case of Gloria Satterfield. This settlement was not made by the insurance companies because they felt that the claims fell within wrongful death on Alex's insurance coverage, but it was made, quote, in the interest of compromise. As we know, the money was not given to Gloria Satterfield's sons. as intended. And Alex Murdaugh told them that they would only be getting about $500,000 because he only told them about the Lloyd's of London insurance coverage. He did not tell them about the other insurance coverages that he had from his businesses. Because remember, he has 4 businesses registered to his name. And Moselle is a commercial hunting property. Now, see, you can see right here the $505,000 from the Lloyd's underwriters. This is what Alex had told them about. But then there is the $3,800,000 from the other insurance. Now, something that's really, really important to note about this particular document, while it was signed and dated by both Judge Carmen T. Mullen and Chad Westendorf as the personal representative of the estate of Gloria Satterfield, this piece of paperwork was never legally filed in the state of South Carolina. As I stated before, in order for a document in the court system to be binding and legal and go into effect, or to be formally submitted as a motion or an action in a lawsuit or in a crime that's being tried in the Court of General Sessions, it has to have the stamp. Either the stamp from being submitted in person to a clerk of court, or the electronic filing sidebar that you will see on a lot of the documents that I had, or that I have, where it says the date, the time, Hampton County or Colleton County or Beaufort down the side. This document has none of it. However, it was still issued and paid on. The insurance companies, because of the signature, because of them having different rules and laws and regulations where they are based from, still followed through with this court order. But it is nowhere in the South Carolina records. It was not anywhere on the dockets. It was not something that had been done the legal way. And Judge Carmen Mullen signed off on it. Exactly. They had to have the hunting insurance at Moselle, which tells us that for the Mallory Beach lawsuit, whatever business is registered to the Moselle property is the one that he had been trying to use for coverage for him and Buster in the lawsuit. But we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. But the other businesses, one of them's a landscaping company. I don't even do anything. It's landscape. Also, there's a business called Bounce Moms LLC that is registered to PMPED, the law firm. Just so y'all know. Like, that's a thing. It exists. Bounce Moms. No clue what it is, but it's registered to PMPED law firm. But yeah, see? So, July 29th, 2019, a Beaufort County judge agrees to amend Paul's bond agreement, changing pretty much the only restriction he had. So he didn't have to be limited to the 14th Judicial Circuit. He was just restricted to the entirety of the state of South Carolina. Because Paul was attending USC, Paul maintained a residence there until his murder. And I do have paperwork about that, by the way. And why should something like boating under the influence resulting in serious bodily injury or death stop you from living your normal life? Now, on September 30th, 2019, the Philadelphia Indemnity Insurance Company filed a motion asking the court to relieve the company of financial responsibilities for any claims by Richard Alexander Murdaugh and Richard Alexander Murdaugh Jr. in regards to the lawsuit filed by Renee S. Beach as personal representative of the estate of Mallory Beach. Renee Beach was also named as a defendant in this filing. The lawsuit filed in federal court. The lawsuit was filed in federal court because due to the insurance company being based in Pennsylvania, and because defending the Murdaughs in the case could potentially exceed the cost of, $75,000. They're just like, nah, federal court. Some of the reasons Philadelphia Indemnity Insurance has no duty to cover the Murdaughs in this case, as they stated in the lawsuit filing, included the Murdaughs are not insured as individuals under the policies. Richard Alexander Murdaugh is the named insured in the policy, but the conduct he is accused of in the lawsuit did not have any connections with his business. The business in question is unknown, as it was not stated in the lawsuit. The policies specifically, now, see, this is why I want to know which one is registered to Moselle. Because there's a couple that are registered to P.O. boxes, and we know that Alex Murdaugh uses his business address as the same P.O. box. But the policies specifically cover injuries from, quote, private hunting operations. None of the court documents or police reports from the incident mentioned anything about a hunting trip on the night of February 23rd. So this is obviously one of the policies that is on a business that is registered to the Moselle property. Moselle is a commercial property, again, because of the like-kind exchange agreement. The insurance documents specifically state that the policies do not apply to bodily injury arising out of the ownership or use of a watercraft. The wrongful death lawsuit does not place Richard Alexander Murdaugh and Richard Alexander Murdaugh Jr. anywhere near the accident on the night Mallory Beach died. But claims their combined and concurred conduct of enabling Paul's behavior directly caused the injury suffered by Beach. They also alleged wrongdoing in the monitoring or supervision of Murdaugh/Murdaugh Jr.'s minor son/minor brother, Paul. So, Philadelphia Indemnity Insurance was just like, no. There's no way. We cannot be held liable for this. So, now, 2020, because of the pandemic and everything like that, there was a lot of back and forth with the Mallory Beach lawsuit. Like a lot. So, Gregory Park filed a motion to change venue from Hampton County back to Beaufort, where the lawsuit was initially filed in March of 2019. He filed that January 3rd. And that set off a legal filing hellstorm, beginning with a January 20th motion to compel, in which attorney Mark Tinsley, who we know absolutely loves to abuse his subpoena power and his request for information, requested that the court require Parkers to fully respond to a request for all documents in possession of Parkers that relate to the claims or defenses in the case, particularly a statement Parker's issued to various media about the lawsuit that has never been produced, as well as the actual receipt from the sale to Paul Murdaugh and not the electronic version / computer screenshot that was provided. Production of personnel files for, among other people, the cashier who made the sale of alcohol to Paul Murdaugh. All camera footage from store number 55 for 7 days prior through February 23rd. Information indicating the percentage of gross and net resulting from the sale of alcoholic beverages and the total gross sales and net sales for the business on an annual basis for each of the preceding 3 years. Copies of any agreements in mitigation of any administrative order, as well as criminal or civil actions brought against the company at any location during the 3 years preceding the boat crash. They also requested any assurances of voluntary compliance executed with the National Association of Attorney General or any individual attorney general related to the sale or distribution of alcoholic beverages, as well as 11 other requests and interrogatories. Mark Tinsley and the attorneys for Parker's filed over 100 documents, 16 affidavits, 6 deposition transcripts, and a lot of exhibits through the start of March. Through all of the filings, we did learn that a witness remembered seeing Paul Murdaugh purchasing different sorts of alcohol at Parker's, and he remembered that Murdaugh looked too young to be drinking. He said the cashier appeared to have glanced at his license, but didn't take the time to check the physical characteristics or question him. He said he remembered saying something like, "Y'all be careful tonight." A Lexington, South Carolina woman would be testifying in the case, saying that Parker's was a well-known establishment for kids under 21 buying booze. The cashier who sold the White Claw, Natty Light, and Michelob Ultra to Paul, quote, knew of his family, end quote, and them having a law firm. Another boat passenger used a fake ID that she got from ID God online to purchase alcohol at Parker's that day. In deposition, the Parker's cashier who sold the alcohol to Paul did not appear to be familiar with policies related to alcohol sales. We also know that 6 affidavits were filed by members of Mallory Beach's family requesting that the trial stay in Hampton because going to Beaufort, where Mallory was killed, would cause emotional distress. Now, March 2020, it marked the first time that the Murdaughs had filed anything in this lawsuit since July 2019, because, I mean, Parker's was just having it out with the beach lawyers. But Parker's has the pockets to do it, because, you see, Gregory Parker at the time owned like 58 gas stations all throughout like the Low Country and in Savannah. He had plenty of different things happen where he had to pay fines for underage alcohol sales. Like this is a common theme with him. Like, you can just look up Parker's Savannah and you'll probably find 3 or 4 different cases. And then being like, oh yeah, he had to pay a fine. They had to reteach how to sell alcohol. Like it's ridiculous. It's stupid. But oh, okay. So, ow, it clicked ahead. That's why. No, go back. Oh my God. Stop it. There we go. Now, when the Murdaughs filed, they filed a joint opposition to Parker's venue change request and submitted affidavits for Christy Murdaugh, Randy's wife, Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Richard Alexander Buster Murdaugh Jr., Margaret Kennedy Bronstetter Murdaugh, Randolph Murdaugh III, and Randolph Randy Murdaugh IV. They all have ridiculously like rich white sounding names. Not gonna lie. Okay, so on April 2nd, 2020, it was announced that Judge DeWitt Hall was going to be assigned to the Mallory Beach case, but the order was not signed until April 24th, 2019. And as we know, the court does not recognize anything until it's like officially submitted and there's electronic file stamp or physical stamp. But that meant that it did not get recognized as being so until April 29th. Or, I'm sorry, April 2nd of 2020. I'm tongue-tied. My bad. But yeah. So, April 24th, 2019, he assigned it, but it did not get submitted until April 2nd, 2020, because, well, that's just how it works here. We're a bit backwards. I don't know if y'all knew that. So, there were more legal filings in regards to the Mallory Beach case. Depositions of other boaters were filed that described Paul as an aggressive drunk. They alleged that Paul refused to allow anyone else to drive the boat that night, that about an hour and a half before the crash, he was throwing chairs and trying to start a fight in a bar in downtown Beaufort. And it was also said in multiple depositions that minutes before the crash, Paul pushed, spit on, and slapped Morgan Dowdy, his then girlfriend, in the face. Parker's, in a lot of their filings, they said that Mallory Beach was negligent in her own death and, quote, with knowledge of the risk, voluntarily exposed herself to and assumed the risk of injury. They blamed the woman that died. Parker's lawyers also argued that they were being targeted because of Greg Parker's deep pockets. One of the latest filings for them had claimed that, or had stated that, quote, claim for punitive damages violates the U.S. and South Carolina constitutions because the amount of punitive damages is based upon the wealth and status of the defendants, end quote. That's not entirely true. But anyway. Now, May 26, 2020, Paul Murdaugh was pulled over in Adams Run, more than 50 miles away from his hometown of Hampton, driving 78 in a 55. Mind you, this dude is out on a bond agreement. His home, he was scheduled to appear in Ravenel Magistrate Court on June 25th, but there is no record of the hearing having ever taken place, and the charge no longer shows up in court filings. The only reason that we know that this charge or this incident even exists is because there is dash cam footage of the officer telling Paul that because Paul doesn't have insurance and he's speeding and stuff like that, to just come to court. We'll help you take care of it. We'll help you figure it out. But there's nothing on record with the court system anymore. June 9th, 2020, Parker's took a turn for the weird in terms of the lawsuit filings. He filed a motion to amend the answer and apply maritime law. So, for those that don't know, maritime law, or admiralty law, is the area of law that governs navigation and shipping. In legal filings, like legal reference works for maritime law, you'll see shipping, navigation, waters, commerce, seamen, wharves, piers, docks, maritime liens, canals, recreation, piracy, ship hacking or hijacking, yeah. Maritime law. But Parker said that because the plaintiff alleges that her claim came out of a boat accident, the plaintiff knew or should have known that admiralty law could apply to her claims. And that because discovery in the case is still ongoing, there is no scheduling order, there was no trial date, and likely wouldn't be one anytime soon, considering the massive disruption caused by the current pandemic, the plaintiff would not be prejudiced by amending it to be maritime law. Parker's reasoning for maritime law? The injuries and death occurred as a result of the operation of a pleasure boat while navigating the waters of Archer's Creek. Thus, the law applies. Mallory's death disrupted maritime commerce, as marine traffic on Archer's Creek and nearby waterways was hindered and limited to emergency vessels during the week-long search and recovery effort for Mallory Beach. And pleasure boating has substantial relationship to traditional maritime activity. I had to include this in there because it's fucking ridiculous. Maritime law did not, no. As much as he wants maritime law to apply, the alcohol was purchased from his establishment, which is on land, prior to the boating itself, and was the direct cause of them, being drunk on the boat. Maritime law does not apply. But, yeah. I thought it was fun. Fun little moment. Now, on September 10th, 2020, mediation was held as an alternative dispute resolution, or ADR, in the state of South Carolina. If you are in a lawsuit and the parties are just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, they do require you to have ADR to see if you can at least come up with like some sort of agreement, some sort of something. In this case, it was mediation that was held with a third party, neutral party, of course, and all the lawyers there doing their thing. And after 8.5 hours of mediation, 8.5 hours of mediation, they got nowhere. They were at an impasse. They were still just stuck in an impasse. So the court case raged on. Between the end of 2020 and June 2021, only 3 motions were filed in the lawsuit, and they were primarily pertaining to housekeeping measures. There was a withdrawal of counsel that was filed because someone had left the law firm that was at the time representing Alex Murdaugh. And so, they had to file that. There was a notice of intent to file defenses. Another motion against Parker's because, well, Parker's had the money to be able to fight pretty much everything that was filed towards him. So all of that brings us to June 5th, 2021. And this is where we will take a pause. It's been about 2.5 hours. I have told y'all a lot of information. And there's still more. And there's stuff that's not included in this, like the rest of the Stephen Smith stuff. And the rest of the property stuff. Like, there's a lot to this, not to mention the fact that we do still have the history of the 14th Judicial Circuit and PMPED, or the Murdaugh firm, to go over. But yeah, so tomorrow night, we will pick it up here with Alex Murdaugh hanging out at the hotel while his wife is at the baseball game. Yeah. And we'll probably do about the same 2.5 hours tomorrow night. Just until we get up to, because we are going to go all the way to when the trial starts. Because there were a lot of things that happened. A lot of really important things. Like, I have screenshots and stuff that I still have to put in here. So please excuse this. But like, a lot of stuff happen. Yeah. So, like, I have... Fuck you, Randy and John. So, thank you all for being here. I absolutely appreciate y'all. Once again, all links to all things in the description. I will have the Google Drive available very, very soon. I'm just making sure that all of the legal documents are properly organized and properly sourced in my source thing. Yeah. Aw. Love you, Lauren. But yeah, this for those that used to hang out with me a lot on Discord, I know I've been absent lately, but a lot of that does have to do with just the amount of work that has gone into this. Because there's a lot there. We're talking over 100 years worth of documents and history. And it's ridiculous. But I should be back to doing my usual shit soon. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful night. Pleasant tomorrow. If you have to work tomorrow, don't muck duck anyone. You know, the whole thing.